At Private Parts of Wellness, we are all about doing things a little bit differently. So, or maybe it's just me because it's basically a one person show. So I'm all about doing things differently. And this episode is about the private parts of psychedelics. So how do we use psychedelics in our aging process? How do we use it in our lives? When is the time to use it? And my guest is Lynsey Ayala, and she is the owner, creator, and educator behind Bread and Butter in the Bronx. She's Bronx born, New Yorican, working in spiritual herbalism, holistic healing, and sacred earth medicine. Anyway, I'll put her bio up. If you are curious about plant medicine, curious about psychedelics, curious about learning about yourself in a different way, listen. I think you'll find it really interesting. I've been drawn to Lynsey and her work for quite some time now. And yeah. All right. Enjoy. Welcome to the Private Parts of Wellness. I'm Jessica Badonsky, your host, and we're diving into the hidden, messy sides of life. Sex, hormones, aging, science, and yeah, a bit of woo-woo too. We're here to embrace imperfections and push back on shame. Growth is messy, and that's where the magic lies. Heads up, I don't hold back on language, so keep those earbuds handy if you're around kids or at work. And a quick note, while I am a nurse practitioner, I'm not your nurse practitioner. Be sure to check with your healthcare team before making any changes. All right, let's talk about some private parts. Right. Years ago, my mother did through Henry Louis Gates, there was this African lineage that you could do, a maternal lineage. And so she did the whole thing, and there was a lot of Ethiopian. And then also she's like, and we have family in the Canary Islands. But it's just so interesting. But art by jar, I found that because my partner is Dominican and he has tattoos, and he wanted to get something that represent the Taino culture on his body.
Yes. Yeah, y'all should definitely reach out to Jar.
I will.
Yeah.
All right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, I love when there's like the connections of like, oh, we already know who this person is. And like, yeah, we're thinking of connecting with them. So yes.
That's it. That's which is how, and I was thinking, how did I find you? How did I find you is so interesting. So I want you to so I used to call this Age Lust, and I just switched the name back to my original business name, which is Private Parts of Wellness, the Private Parts of Wellness, the podcast, because it's, aging is something hopefully we all go through. But it just, the private parts more speaks to who I am and what I want to share with people. And it's these intimate parts of our lives that are they're just private, not secret necessarily, but private. Anyway, so you, Lynsey, I don't even know how I found you. I really,
here we are.
But here we are. And what we're going to talk about today is plant medicine, and in all of its forms, and your wisdom. And I want everyone to know who you are, because I think that one of the things, as I'm a family nurse practitioner, which because we've discussed that a little bit. One of the things that I'm doing personally right, but also how it hopefully translates into my practice is that evidence-based medicine is so important, right? That we have these studies and we have this information and we have guidelines, but they don't speak to the individual, and how much beautiful work can come out of listening to the people that we work with. and even our intuitive knowledge of how I have just, you've come out with a new offering. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about, anyway, I found you. Who are you? What do you do? How do you call yourself? How do you want us to refer to you? I mean, I think of you as a teacher. I think of you as a leader. I think that your actual physical presence to be with you, because I've now met you in real life, it doesn't change from who I see you in the virtual world to be. It is warmth and knowledge and safety. Okay, so that's.
Oh,
But
I
who are
appreciate that.
you?
Thank you. Well, I guess who I am depends on like the day, what personality I wake up with,
Mm.
like what mood, what it's giving for the day. Um, but I would call myself an educator. I feel like that has been a big part of where I started my brand. So I own a brand called Bread and Butter. Um, the brand has been around for 9 years this year, which is like so crazy. I've been doing a lot of reflection work around this time. Um, but yeah, I'm an educator. I feel like a lot of people know me for my work in entheogenic medicine, psychedelic medicine, sacred earth medicine. Um, I do a lot of work in Caribbean spiritual herbalism. I walk the line between like Ifa and Candomblé, but I've been studying so many different forms of African traditional religions that I feel like they all, as they do, it's like it just all blends in together. I also run a botanica that I've had a brick and mortar actually since 2017 in many different iterations, and I really like the rebirthing experience and like letting things run their course. And so this is my fourth brick and mortar space in all of this time, and it's been really a journey, which is all of bread and butter, and that's really who I am. I feel like I've just been a storyteller, an educator. I make medicine. I say fifth generation, but the line of curanderismo and medicine work goes way further back than that. But this is as far as I can trace back to know that there were medicine women in my family who have held and owned their own healing spaces, even if it was like in the shack in the back of the farm back in Puerto Rico, to, having their own spiritual shops like botanicas and apothecaries. Um, yeah, I'm just a lot of the things. I just became a mom last year also, which has played such a huge role as it does, in this last year, and what bread and butter is looking like, what it's feeling like, what type of work or transmissions that I'm sharing with folks. I feel like a lot of bread and butter and a lot of what I've been doing has been channeling information from ancestors, from earth, from the flowers, from the trees, from, you know, being able to be in community with so many folks has been beautiful because I am having those conversations with people. And I really appreciate you saying that about like a safe space,
Mm.
because that's something that I really have been striving to create for folks, especially folks of color. Like I grew up, I'm a Puerto Rican from the Bronx, so having my botanica in the Bronx now has been so special just so I can hear what folks need and be able to channel what that medicine looks like. And I think it's also great that you're like, I don't even know how I found you. And I'm like, that's how bread and butter has grown for the last almost decade. It's like word of mouth. And like someone shared maybe an Instagram reel, or like you came to one of our many events and it's like, oh, my friend just brought me. And like now we're like riding together all these years, you know? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's that's kind of me and the business in a nutshell.
I do think of you as this connector of not only of community and people, but a connector of a person to themselves, right? Because that's what this
Yes.
medicine is about. So the one thing that I really want to get into, the whole idea of transitioning from maiden, mother, and also the space that you hold as this, the curator of this, of this space that you've created. Um, so what's your first memory of this type of medicine? How did you get into the psychedelic space? What, like, because I'm
Yeah,
just
how did
gonna,
that happen?
yeah, how did that happen? Because I think that there's also I want to talk about generations as well, because I'm a different generation than you, and so yeah. So what's your first
Mhm.
memory of being around medicines and then psychedelic medicines?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Bronx and my grandparents lived in the Castle Hill area, so like more of the North Bronx. And I was lucky enough to grow up with a backyard,
Mm.
which was awesome. Like some of my earliest memories are in my grandparents' garden. My grandfather was like an urban farmer. He grew tomatoes and strawberries and eggplants and squash. And I remember they had a huge section of just mints, like spearmint and mints. And that was like, I was always in the backyard creating potions, creating brews with like cups of water and like rubbing different plants and like mixing them. And there are all these photos of me like sitting in the middle, like eating the tomatoes. And it's like, so that's just been in me. And my both of my grandparents are from Puerto Rico, and they taught me about plants, plants and flowers and vegetables. And I think I had a different experience seeing them around me more so than, a lot of us who just have access to them in the grocery store or wherever. So I understood that like Earth was constantly providing for us.
Mm.
And I saw how much care and my grandpa would sing when he was in the garden, and my grandma would be in the backyard picking food to make meals. So I've just been raised, and I don't think I realized that until way later in life, where psychedelics came into play. Um, some of the plants and like herbs my grandparents grew were also medicinal. So I knew some of the like properties. I knew what mint was like good for my belly when my belly was upset. I knew that, certain leaves would like help me go to sleep. So I had this like background knowledge, as I think many of us do, who are able, who are lucky enough to grow up with elders around us. Um, and then fast forward to college, I finished my last 2 years of undergrad. I decided to move to San Francisco. I've been since very young the type of person who my dreams are very vivid. And since this highly spiritual aspect of like espiritismo, mediumship, is really present in my family, it's always been like, my mom's like, oh, your dream? Like, oh, you had that dream again? Like, oh, we should think about that. Like, what does that make you, how do you feel talking about that? Like, anyway, I was having lots of dreams of San Francisco, and I was in art school and I decided to transfer. I got a scholarship, went to school in the Bay, and I didn't know anyone. I left like on a whim because my dreams told me that I should, and things worked out, and here I am in the Bay, right? And I meet my ex-husband when I was in college. We met at like 22, and he worked on a cannabis farm a few hours north in Mendocino. So he's like, "Hey, do you want to make some extra cash? Like on the weekends, it's a really cool experience." And I'm like, this kid from the Bronx, like I've been interacting with cannabis for
Yeah.
a long time at that point. Like I was pretty young when I started, smoking and everything. So I was like, this opportunity to see weed in its natural state and like be amongst the plants, I was like, yeah, I'm down. Like I'm down. So this situation, this moment is like catapulted, is literally why I am where I am today. Me being like stepping foot on this farm, and it was the first time that I had felt so connected to the land again, which is so interesting because I had never been to California prior to deciding to move there on this whim. Um, and yeah, like a lot of herbalists that I speak to, and a lot of folks who work in plant medicine and the umbrella of it, we always talk about the first plant that spoke to us, the first plant that we felt like really connected to. And I had this experience with peppermint spearmint as a child, but the way I felt about the cannabis plant and the downloads that I was receiving from this plant, and just the way that even in that first year, like I found myself working on the farm. I was camping like in the redwoods. Like this is something that I was doing for a decade, but this was like my first month. The first time I ever went camping was here. Like everything I did related to connecting to the earth was here in this farm, with these plants really like calling me back, calling me back. Um, and I just yeah, I was really lucky enough to be on a farm with a family who were beautiful, like wonderful land stewards. They really respected and do, they still have this farm. They respect the plant very much so, and really care for the land in a way that I mean, this is my first experience, so I just thought that this was how it was, like this is the experience because I saw my grandparents having that experience. And, I'm on this farm that is very much in that same energy. Um, yeah, and I started working. I was farming. I did everything from trimming to, helping in the cultivation process to building grow spaces for, you know, everything on the farm. Like I spent a decade there.
Wow.
And through that time, like I was connecting with my grandma because outside of cannabis, they did have like their family lived there. So there was like an herb garden. They grew vegetables, they grew fruits. Like Northern California is like the place to like have these lush, beautiful gardens. So I would be spending all this time there. I had really bad asthma and like I'm allergic to everything. I'm kind of a bubble kid.
Yeah.
Shout out to growing up in the Bronx and then going into the woods, my body's like, what is this? So I was, there was lobelia up there. There were peppermint there. There was like, sage up there. So I was connecting with these other plants, connecting with cannabis. From there, I feel like, I mean, I started studying clinical herbalism while I
Mm.
was working the first 2 years on that farm. Um, and I think also being in college in San Francisco, like being in that, it might have happened if I was decided to stay here, but there was this openness about experimenting with psychedelics that I had never experienced before. And especially with the people on the farm, like we really became a family. And I tried mushrooms for the first time there, and it was in a really great, like guided way. Like I just feel so lucky that I had these like really
Yeah.
safe experiences where I took mushrooms and there was like two folks, hanging out with us who weren't on mushrooms, who were like making sure we were good. And it was a great experience. The first time I took LSD was with a group of friends and we walked through the city and like had playlists that we made together so that if we felt overwhelmed, we popped the playlist in. Like I had this really beautiful experience surrounding these, you know, psychedelic medicines, these entheogenic medicines. And I decided to move back after 5 years. I came back to New York. Um, and like I said, I went to art school. So this was like, I feel like all of these things now as I'm looking back, like I understand, I see the golden thread. It's like I went to art school, I was a portrait artist, I studied like contemporary jazz and all these things. So it was like, you go to art school, my mom's like, what are you doing? But like I support you. I'm just happy you're in school. But like, what are you doing? You're working on this weed farm on the weekends. And
Right. Like, how are you going to get an
you know,
apartment in New York with all that? Yeah.
anywhere. Like so I was just really throwing things against the wall and, picking up the breadcrumbs, as I would say, like, they were being laid out. And I was like, yeah, that feels good. Okay, let me see where that goes. Um, After my first year here back in New York, I decided to create like a plant medicine art gallery experience. And I rented out the Living Gallery right on Bushwick, like under the J train. Funny enough, I ended up opening a space next door to it like a few years later. But this was the first bread and butter event, and I had a small selection of handmade cannabis products like salves, and I made a cannabis lubricant. I made tinctures, and I was always blending things with other plants, the plants that I was working with on this farm. And I was talking about, which has always been the message, is like, yes, cannabis is like this thing, but it's like, so is peppermint, so is spearmint, so is the sage, so are these berries, so are these flowers. And I was creating these like entourage supported plant medicines. And it was just a little pop up. I also was like making fabrics and all the like I was just it was an art experience. I had friends who were performing. We had a friend who like opened with a breathwork like experience, and we didn't know what was happening. It was just me, my ex, a couple friends, and we were like, yeah, let's just like do it. And it was amazing. I sold everything, and folks were like, oh, when are we doing another one? Like, when is the next? And this was September 2015. by February 2016, this was my job. Like I was creating medicines, hosting events, hosting these knowledge share, I would call them knowledge share experiences, but it surrounded music, it surrounded community and art. And it was, I think Brooklyn also at that time was a really interesting space. And I think, yeah, I was young. I was like 26, 27.
Yeah.
So it was like a little bit of like audacity, delusion, like a little bit of like, fuck it, So
What you need, which is so right for the 20s, right?
right, like now at 36, I'll be like, I need like the full plan.
Yeah.
But that's how Bread and Butter has started, and I really just like it grew some legs. It started walking. It started, doing what it's doing now, and I think that that's still very much the spirit of what the brand is. But in that time, I've done so many different types of apprenticeships, internships. Like I went back to school for psychedelic therapy to work transpersonal therapy and understand, how to, because a lot of my spiritual work surrounds like pláticas. I make medicine for people. I have these one-on-one consultations where, you were saying about Western medicine. It's like sometimes you just need to hear people and understand exactly what they need. And that's what my family has done for so long. But the way that I took what my ancestors and my lineage has been doing is I'm using supportive plant medicines, not necessarily always psychedelic medicines. Sometimes it's flower essences.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, a plant cleansing. Sometimes it's music. Sometimes it's creative practices that we do that it's like a journey work. But I decided to do this therapy degree to like be able to understand folks better, to be more trauma informed, to be just a better tool, I guess, like a better instrument so that I can be of better service and of more service. Yeah, and that's just this last year I've been kind of taking it easy because I have this beautiful
Baby.
baby girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the medicine is still coming, the events are still happening,
And the
yeah, it's
inspiration is coming, right? So
yeah, always.
there's so much. First of all, I want to just side note, uh, look, I love every single playlist that you have on Spotify.
Thank you.
Like anytime you see that somebody is following one of your playlists, it's me. It is me. I am following like every single playlist because I'm like, and I think when we were talking about maybe creating an event at one point, and I think I said to you that I'm listening to your playlist, and I just every time I listen to a playlist of yours, I'm like, oh, how does she know? How does she know where I'm
I
at?
love that.
How does she know what's happening for me? I mean, it is just so good. So good.
That's my love language. Like since high school, I was a person like burning CDs, and I'm like, I made
Yes.
you a collage CD cover. Like this is a poem for you in music.
There's a book about, this is such a side note. There's a book about a mixtape, something in the mixtape something. I read it a long time ago, but it's about like this guy who makes mixtapes for his love. And I think it's a real life story. And then if I remember correctly, she dies. But it's his kind of memoir of making mixtapes for
Oh my
his love.
goodness.
And listen, the mixtapes, like they
That's
need to come
beautiful.
back. They need to come anyway.
I
Your
know.
playlists are a mixtape for me.
Oh yeah,
Like
for sure. I love that.
I absolutely love them. But I want to talk about there's just I think there's something to be said about being in the right space. I know for me, my generation, Gen X, we had Nancy Reagan. Drugs were really bad. In my own personal family, there was a lot of drug use in my family. And like we had bags of cannabis, like gallon bag Ziplocs in the freezer. My dad used to grow his own, and the FBI came to the house at one point. So there
Oh
was a
my
lot
goodness.
of stuff happening
Yeah.
in my childhood, right? And so when I started to get interested in high school, there were people who were there was one person in particular, so fucking brilliant. I mean, he still is super smart. And he was using psychedelic medicine, and he would just have the best conversations. But for me, as a young person, it was really, I couldn't do it just because I felt like I was seeing not the best of what medicines had to offer, right?
Yeah, yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, and then it wasn't until I started to read How to Change Your Mind where
Hmm.
he talks specifically about older people and being in middle age and that being a really ripe time to start to think about psychedelics.
For
Um
sure.
and the person that is now middle aged, you know, we've talked about psychedelics in terms of like, how do we introduce them to the young people in our lives? Is that appropriate? Is that not appropriate? You know, just on an individual level. I have not, like, nobody called the cops on me or anything like that. I've not done anything illegal, you know, stop. But, uh, anyway, when I think about you, and I know when you were on Instagram, and I'm going to list all of that so people can find you, you were really
Okay.
open about using psychedelics in your pregnancy.
Hmm.
And how did that come about? Had you known? I know that Mothering Magazine did a whole article, like I want to say 40 years ago, because it was, my oldest is 20, and I was a doula before I even, I was a doula before I had kids. And this article on
Cool.
mothering was like way before that. And it was about a mom who was using cannabis because she was constantly vomiting through her
Hmm.
pregnancies. Um, what, how did you, what was your feeling and your thought around, and the medicine that you created, that it's called Sunshine, right? That's the
Yeah.
formula,
Hmm.
around pregnancy, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. You know, I I feel like having the background of clinical herbalism for a decade before being pregnant really helped me to understand my body. And there, unfortunately, on an intuitive level as well as, yes, on this like science level, um I did do a lot of research. It was hard to find information on these things. um and years before having excuse me, being pregnant, I was working with pregnant folks. Like, I have a community of doulas that I work with, so I would have pregnant parents coming in, and mostly it was like the anxiety of welcoming in a new person, the body dysmorphia, I mean,
Yeah.
just feeling uncomfortable in your body, like dissociative tendencies, of course, like intense morning sickness, and just like the aches and pains that our bodies really go through when we're like carrying a baby. um, and at the time when I started working with pregnant folks and with plant medicines, it was CBD mostly. I did have a few parents who were open to cannabis on, like, I would make these like very light edibles, or light dose tinctures, and like show them how to like dose it out in the proper way. Um, so I had this background, and then when I decided to start school for psychedelic therapy, I was lucky enough to be able to spend time in South America. The course, like, it was being taken place in Colombia. Um, so I was working with plant medicine folks there, shamans, like sitting with medicine people. Um, so I was witnessing and seeing folks who were who were carrying children, like sitting for ayahuasca ceremonies, because it was a part of their cultural practice, their spiritual practice, and this has been a part of their practice for ever,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there are beautiful, healthy children and families all around. And it happens, and it really took me into this space of, oh my God, like, I hadn't really thought of this in this way. So I went in this deep research space of, what other indigenous folks and tribes are using these medicines as a part of their practice, like while gestation, like in gestation, like what does that look like? What are the ideas behind this, the beliefs behind this? What happens to these children? Like, how are these mothers and these children doing, afterwards, like once they're here? And everybody, like, for everyone's fine. If I felt like, from what I've read and what I've
Yeah.
experienced and what I've seen, everything was fine. As there's moderation, of course. There is, I think, the spiritual component that's really important, like understanding and knowing that the technologies of these plant medicines are shifting our bodies for the greater good. And as we are carrying babies, like, it's shifting them as well. There is that like idea of that higher consciousness, those technologies coming into our bodies and like doing what the medicine is supposed to do. And I've lived my life that way, in that belief. So when I found out I was pregnant, for the first couple months, I was like, I'm not gonna smoke. I'm not gonna like sit with cannabis or like, anything. I kind of just like took a break. But by reaching into like month 3 was like when my morning sickness was like so bad. It was not even morning. It was like it was just sickness.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Maybe if I take an edible that's like 3 to 5 milligrams, I can probably stop throwing up. Or like, I have to drive to work. I have to take the train to work. I have to take the bus to work. Like all of these things, like I would get on a moving vehicle and I was wanting to throw up. And it's like, I have to, live life. So I was trying the low dose edibles and they were fine. They were great. It helped suppress my nausea. Around that time, I was able to be a part of the National Psychedelic Conference in DC. And they had a really beautiful lineup of panels and conversations with birth workers, with medicine people, with just parents who were, using psychedelics. They even had teenagers, like the parents' children, come on and talk about their experiences, like microdosing with the family, what these ceremonies looked like, from the spiritual, like sitting in community with the medicine people, to sitting in your living room and creating a record lineup with your mom and dad, and you guys are just dosing and talking about life together. And this was like, my partner and I sat there like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, and these children, it was so beautiful to hear from them because, who better to hear than from them? And the types of experiences and relationships that they were having with their parents and with themselves and with their siblings. And I was just like, if this is a beautiful possibility. This is like another option that I hadn't really considered in that way outside of taking these like light dose edibles. And, I did do a lot of soul searching. I did sit and I'm like, do I want to sit with this medicine because it's something that I've been doing for so long? Do I want to sit with this medicine? And it's like this habit and it's something that I'm just like, it's been a part of my life for so long. Or is this something that, I'm just I was just being more mindful with the way that I was ingesting and imbibing and sitting. So by the time my 3rd trimester came, I decided that it was time for me to microdose because I was experiencing lots of anxiety around welcoming my baby. I also had my daughter at 35, and the way the midwives were making me feel, it was like this geriatric pregnancy. There was so much fear being put onto me, and intuitively I knew that I trust my body. I know that I trust my body. Like I know that everybody on this earth has come through the portal of a woman.
Yeah.
So I know that this isn't some new shit. It's like this is the oldest this is the oldest trip, in the world.
Yeah.
So going back to a familiar medicine that has helped me and has been a supportive tool throughout so many years of my life, like, was so important for me to do that during this. Like, I felt, becoming a mother is an initiation.
Yeah.
So it was a really beautiful, supportive tool during this process, and reminding myself to listen to my body, to not let anyone tell me what I don't know. I knew I was healthy. I knew I could do this, like get to the finish line with a healthy baby. And it really helped me to, like, again, like I said, trust myself, to just like tap in, listen to my own voice. I decided like midway through my pregnancy to leave the midwife house that I was at and started somewhere new, because the medicine is like, girl, you know what you got to do.
Yeah.
Like, why are you like, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Your baby's fine. Everything is fine. And in that process, like, I found a doula that I really loved as well. Like, she's still such a part of my life and my daughter's life and my husband's life. And
Oops, while we have some technical difficulties. Now is a great time to remind you that small gestures make a big difference. Please like, share, hit the bell, and review. It helps the show get to more people. I'd love to hear from as well.
Where'd you go? Uh-oh. Oh, I lost you for a second. What happened? Let's see. Oh, there you are. I was just going to send you a message. It's okay.
I don't know.
It's all right.
I don't know what happened.
It just this is what happens. It's okay. Not a big. I was just gonna. I'm totally okay with it. So I'm right there with you. So you listen to your intuitive self. You got a new doula. The doula is still very much a part of your life, and this is your final trimester. And how did the anxiety feel? Because I think, I wish I had this. And I wonder also, what did you have a family lineage that had postpartum depression? Was that something, had you had PMS symptoms prior to? What happened when you use this medicine? And tell me more, because I was right there with you.
Yeah. So, I didn't share with the doula was the only person who was, and my partner were the only people during my process, and the internet, because I was sharing my journey on the internet openly, but
in the world,
the folks who were going to be helping me bring my baby earthside did not know that this was a part of my practice. But my doula was really supportive of it. And yeah, I mean, you asked me about postpartum depression. I actually feel like I definitely went through an experience of that as well. I stopped microdosing a little bit after having Mila.
Shut up! That's your child's name.
Mila, yes.
That was going to be my third child's name.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. It means strong worker. That's crazy.
Yes.
That is what her
and
name
it's
is going to be.
Miracle, all of the things. I love that name so much.
Stop it. I'm going to cry. Okay, go ahead.
So shortly after having her, I did go through postpartum depression, but for me, I think it was more about my separation from work, my separation from this entity of bread and butter that I had been doing for so long.
Your first baby.
My first baby, yeah. Which has been shout outs to therapy and moving through. I feel like something I want to say too is, while we have these plant medicines and I was able to have this microdosing experience while pregnant, it was really important for me to go through this process of feeling the feels and understanding this shift that I was not even walking into, in the thick of, where I was I really do have to process this. I have to integrate. I know that I have these plant medicines as allies when I need them, but I feel we need to take those breaks. There needs to be breaks to breathe and to trust your tools again, because the medicine reminds us that in that process when I was shifting, clinics and midwives and all of the things, it was I needed that reminder to trust myself, because lots of the things around me were telling me otherwise. And I was able to birth a healthy baby and like, you know, heal from, I had to have an emergency. My birth story was crazy, which I'm
Yeah.
sure so many folks are as well, but I had to have an emergency C-section, which I wasn't planning for. So there was like a level of trauma that I was experiencing
Mm.
about that and expectations that I'm like, the whole purpose, like the whole goal of this was to have a healthy baby and to be healthy myself. And thankfully, like that's how it's gone. Um, but when this period came of like sadness and transition, and I don't think I don't think anybody can prepare you. Like my own mother, my friends who are mothers, all of the freaking books I read, the podcasts I listened to, like we know that that's coming. Like there's this like moment of grief, but nobody can prepare
Mm.
you for it because you have to walk through, it is that initiation process. Like you have to walk through that fire yourself. You have to like experience it. And I knew that. So I was like, I think I'm gonna like take a pause from plant medicines for a while. Like I was using my supplements. I was like doing the placenta. I was microdosing with my placenta like shortly after that. But I was getting back to myself in the way that I knew how, cooking, being with the baby,
Yeah.
like all leaning on my tools, like
Yeah.
my, spiritual tools and my community, my family. So yeah, I just want to say that like, this plant medicine experience has been such a part of my life, but I needed to have those bouts of, challenge to strengthen and to be resilient enough to like move on to the next thing. Um, but yeah, so we spoke about postpartum and you asked me another question. Um, I don't remember because I know we got a little cut off.
No, no, no. I think that's so. I think was just talking about like the formula and how you came about it. But the thing that's interesting to me is I was reading this article from, I have to look because I did write a couple notes of from the Pharmacy Times or pharmaceutical. I don't know. I can't read my own chicken scratch here. And it's an interview with Jennifer Chesek, who wrote a book about women and psychedelics and psilocybin in particular. And she talked about her understanding that psilocybin in particular. So we're talking about magic mushrooms, just so we can break some stuff down. But um, okay, here's the thing. Do you know what the ACEs score is?
No.
It's adverse childhood experiences. And there are 10 questions that you're asked about adverse childhood experiences. And they did this study, and this goes back to like generational trauma. And her thought is that psilocybin, because, and I want to talk a little bit about that kind of calling you to the medicine, right? And because it's, the other thing about cannabis medicine, and I could be wrong, is that I believe it's female, right? The actual plant is female. And there's so much feminine energy around this medicine, right?
Yeah.
And so you're kind of called to the medicine, and psilocybin can help you to heal some of the generational trauma. So the ACEs score, adverse childhood experiences, they did a study with postpartum depression. And they said it's not like, meaning if your ACEs score is over 4, you're going to have postpartum depression. But a lot of people with postpartum depression have a score that's over 4. And it's like, it kind of goes through like horrible things that a child can witness or actually experience, right? And you can like to like people not being on this earth anymore.
Right.
And I've also seen that same thing happens with, they're starting to find the same kind of connection with people in their menopause journey, and that their menopause journey can be even harder. And we know that women of color, in particular, brown and black women, well, a lot of us have a harder time with the menopause transition. I've been going through it since 38. I just finished a period at 53. I'm still bleeding. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so I think about these medicines and I think about how helpful and powerful if called to it. And I think about my own journey with my 3 births and aging, and it's really, I don't know what my point was. But
yeah, well, mushroom, I feel like you saying mushroom medicine like speaks to that, and cannabis as well.
Yeah.
Like I haven't heard of the ACEs test, but I'm interested in doing some research
Yes,
on
10
that.
questions. Look it up. You can answer them
I
yourself. My
will.
score is 8. It's a fucking mess.
I'm like, I could only imagine for me, like, but something I don't really speak about that often, is, you know, I grew up in the midst of the drug war, the
Yeah.
war on drugs. Um, my dad was in and out of prison most of my life for dealing with drugs, whether it was using or selling or, you know, so I've, there's some folks who go completely the opposite way and they're like, I'm never touching anything.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
just, or, there's the other spectrum where folks can fall right into the pattern. Um, on my paternal, like my dad's side of the family, that has been the pattern. There's like, lots of abuse, drug abuse, addictions, walking on the other side of the law,
Yeah.
so to say, and same with my mom's side, it just looks a little bit different there. So this has definitely been a big influence and a big part of why I'm so heavily focused on the education and like taking it back to that spiritual aspect of these sacred earth medicines. I think, that destigmatizing it has been really important for me and understanding, my dad wasn't like addicted to mushrooms. You can't be addicted to mushrooms. Like he
Yeah.
was definitely addicted to like pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I grew up kind of afraid of that guy. I started smoking pretty young, but I didn't do mushrooms for the first time till I was 24, where my friends were tripping at 15, 16, like, So I definitely had a longer journey to get to being like ready, like brave enough and like, secure enough in myself and being like, I'm not going to get addicted to this. I'm not going to get addicted to this. That doesn't happen. Like, I'm going to be fine.
Yeah.
But mushroom medicine has been so instrumental in me healing so much of that trauma that I have surrounding what that did to my life, what that did to my family, having a parent who, was an addict and being in and out of the system since I was a baby born, like a baby. My dad was like in the streets really young. Um, and just my parents, they're still together. My parents have been together since they were 17. So my parents have gone through this journey and like, it's been such a trip. And I think especially, dealing with that trauma, mushroom medicine, like microdosing therapy, psychedelic therapy, like taking larger doses with therapists and not even always therapists, like a proper guide,
Yeah.
like a person that you trust. It feels like therapy. These journeys are really therapy. Sometimes we're afraid of the bad trip. I've learned to come to embrace it, when it does happen, because there's something that we're avoiding and the medicine is asking us to look a little bit more closely. Um, Something about mushroom medicine that I've learned is it is very feminine.
Mm.
Like if we look back to the Mazatec experience of mushrooms and Maria Sabina, where a lot of us like we think of her as like the grandmother of mushrooms, and we base a lot of our studies and the energetics of the mushroom medicine from her songs, from her stories, from the experiences that folks had with her. And she would sit for the veladas, these like overnight ceremonies with families, the mother, the father, the children, like the grandparents, the aunties, the uncle, whoever was willing to sit, because the mushrooms were called Los Niños Santos for the Mazatec people. The little children, these lights, the mushrooms take us through the death. Like the mushrooms are the first sign of decaying. Something is ready to go. Something's ready to die, essentially. So it's taking us into the womb, like into that darkness. And we process that. There is that ego death that we experience. There is that, and that's just releasing these beliefs or systems or stories that we tell ourselves, like releasing that ego and realizing that that shit doesn't matter. Like what matters is finding yourself again, the remembering, the like finding the light within again. And mushrooms take us on that journey from the high doses to the micro doses. Like we're integrating in real life in a microdose experience. And it's helping us like gracefully release that ego self, remember who we are, we capture that light, and the little children bring us back. So, it is this deeply therapeutic journey. And then we talk about it, we express. So that's truly been my experience with this medicine. And becoming a parent, I didn't even want children for the longest time. I was like, my childhood was so crazy. Like, I don't think I want to do that. Like, which is why I waited so long to even, you know, try. Um, so as I was moving through my pregnancy, I of course was like taking more of a magnifying glass to my family dynamics, and my partner was doing the same. And, you know, what kind of life are we going to give our baby? You know, like what kind of parents do we want to be? What kind of partners do we want to be? What type of co-parents do we want to be? Like, you know, and it has caused us, I don't want to say caused us, it's been like a process of a rebirth, you know, a rewriting of our histories, um, a change, like bringing a change. And for me, a lot of that change, a lot of finding that light and like remembering, even when I'm not sitting with the medicine, that the light is within me always. Like sometimes you just need one mushroom trip that's going to be completely life changing, you know, and it's just like the message, maybe that is the message you needed to hear. And that's like, will help you change the course of your life. Maybe it's a reset that you revisit every now and again where you're like, I need to be reminded, you know, like I know it's there, but like help me find it. Like this particular medicine helps us in a gentle way, like a very feminine, gentle way, helps us to remember. And, you know, and that yin flow like walks us back to that light. Um, yeah, it's been, yeah, I don't know what else to say about it.
No, I think that's so beautiful. I have not ever done anything. I have I'm just outing myself. I have microdose, and I want to talk about your newest formula because I got it. I pre-ordered that shit.
Yeah.
I haven't started it, but I pre-ordered it.
Awesome.
And when we talk about microdose, for those people who are like, what the hell are they talking about? We're talking about, you don't necessarily feel anything when you take a microdose, right? This is not, you're not going to be tripping. You're not going to be unable to do your daily activities. Nobody's going to know, you know, it is we call it what? Sub-perceptual.
Sub-perceptual. Yeah.
And it's so interesting too, because I've done it a couple times now, and I did it with the creative one, the energetic one that you offer, and then I did it for the sorrow one.
Oh, Jurema.
And I was like, oh no, I gave that to a friend who had lost somebody very close, and I said, I'm not ready for this. I said, this is for you. No.
This is not for me right now, but you can have that.
I was like,
go ahead.
Look, you know, sorry for your loss. Here you go. I was like, enjoy this because I am not in that space. But it's interesting. Right. The reason. Oh no, did I lose you again? Oh no, there you go.
No, I'm right here.
The reason that I wanted the creativity one is because I do have ADHD. I'm very out about that, and I do not take stimulants for it. Because the stimulants are so, they contain me so tightly. I just don't like it. They really like depress me and put me where I have a straitjacket on. But with the creative one, which can be more uplifting for people, according to your information, it didn't do that at all. It kind of like chills me out in this nice way where I like just feel okay. But interestingly, there were days where I would be taking it, and like the next day where I usually would feel like quote unquote better or good or feel like that second day, I wouldn't at a certain point. I was like, oh, obviously that's okay because I'm supposed to be feeling whatever I'm feeling today.
Yes.
It's amazing. It is so amazing. Yes. I don't want to take too much more of your time because we've spent, but I do want to talk a little bit. I want to talk about that formula, and I really want to talk very quickly about the essences that you offer.
Yeah.
Because I got the ayahuasca one just because I was like, I'm never doing ayahuasca because anything that you got to vomit or shit on yourself, that is not the move for me.
Like that's not for me, but this sounds cute.
I was like, yeah, exactly. I was like, this, I'll take a tincture and see. Did nothing. But when I was there last time, I got the bleeding heart one. But I don't know. You know what? Let me tell you something. Tell you, Placebo is a real fucking thing. And if you are like really into your masculine mind, look up the article in the New York Times, okay? So I don't want to hear that it doesn't work. I am telling you, I've been using it every day.
Yeah.
And it centers me and it gets me into a space where it is like it actually I'm like, this is
Like, I feel this.
yes, I
Yeah.
feel this. I feel the boundaries. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like this space that you are you and I am me, and we're going to move in our
Yes.
spaces together individually. And as a person who's a caregiver 24/7 with my family,
Mm-hmm.
with my patients, with my community, it is really powerful. So I want you to talk a little bit about those essences. Then we're going to get to this formula,
Yeah.
and then you can move on with your life.
Yeah. No, of course. Um, so the essences, I've actually been making flower essences as long as bread and butter has been around, but this is the first year, the last 2 years maybe a little longer. That's been a couple years that I've been like really putting them out on the shelves. Um, I don't want to say I didn't think folks were ready for it, but no one was really speaking about energetics in the way that I was like, oh, this could actually be helpful for you and where you are. So to explain what a flower essence is, think about it in a visual way. So let's say we're seeing the bleeding heart, right? The bleeding heart, if you see, you can Google it, it actually looks like a heart and it looks like a little teardrop, like 2 or 3 little teardrops coming from the base of that heart. And every flower, everything has, its energy code, like its signature code. So imagine we're looking at this flower essence and we're looking at the aura of this flower essence. So the aura is like bright pink and has some greens in there because we're working with our heart chakra. And so this aura and essence that we're seeing around this flower. So a flower essence is we take those flowers, we put them in a bowl of water because it's believed and known that water is one of the most spiritual conduits. Water holds memory, water holds intention, prayer. It's nourishing. It teaches us how to be in flow and how to not hold too tightly, but to allow ourselves to fill up where we need to and to move when it's time to go, to dissipate, to do all of the things. It takes on so many forms just as we do. So we take this aura and this flowers, placing them in that spiritual conduit of water. The water is now completely filled with that aura.
Mm.
There's that like pink and green aura in the water. And then we take that spiritually charged water, and we put it in bottles. And so now all of the bottles have these beautiful green and pink auras around them, and it's holding the like essence and ashe of these flowers. And then we take those bottles and we put that into our mouth, we put it into our drinks. So now everything that it touches and it comes into contact with is full of that bright pink aura, that green aura. And the signature, like the energy signature of bleeding heart, is like empath medicine. So I love that you're drawn to that because you are a caretaker, you're a nurse, you're a partner, you're a parent, like you're all of these, you're like a community lead, like you're an educator. There's so many aspects of you that is in service, and bleeding heart helps us to love with gentle boundaries, like understanding when our cup is like, oh, I'm at the last drop and I need that for myself, because how can I be of service for you tomorrow? So let me go take a moment and I'm here, I'm empathetic to what's happening, compassionate to what's happening, but I will see you tomorrow. Like I need a moment. So there are those gentle love and boundaries, because how can we love others if we can't love ourselves? So that's basically what a flower essence is. That particular one actually came from my grandmother's garden. She's been having bleeding heart growing in front of her house since I was a kid. And that's the case with our all of the essences. There's some that come from my personal garden. And every one of them has a story. Like if you go on our Instagram, there's a flower essence directory, or Instagram, excuse me, our website. There's a directory and it'll tell you the hike that I found it at, where I was. Some of them we have Ghost Pipe. I found that in Mendocino, and all of these flower essences have come to me when I really needed that energy, when I needed that aura to be a part of my body and to like help me energetically into what I was moving through, moving towards. It's interesting because I still have like so many that are just not bottled yet, that are just like the mother essences. And and recently in the shop, we've been like redecorating and like reorganizing things. So I've been rebottling them and like, just I'm like alphabetizing them and all the things. And it's so funny to look back and, realize where I was in life in that moment where, for example, the ghost pipe talks about that death and rebirth energy. It's like, it lives at the gateway of the transition. Like, okay, that thing is ready to go. So how do we get you to like that space of like letting go gracefully? And I found it as I was going through divorce, like I was going through separating my life from someone I was with for a decade. I was going through walking to a new space in life, and it helped me to like release things gracefully. And I think that folks underestimate the power of flower essences. But they're so powerful. It's like I think of them as like expressions and manifestations of source, of God, like we have these beautiful flowers surrounding us. They are like, you learn so much. Like I have some flowers here. Like you can learn so much just from like the way it expresses itself. Like, the sunflower is all about capturing that authentic energy, finding your inner light and learning how to radiate that outwards. Like, and that's exactly what a sunflower does. It faces the sun. It has this beautiful head of yellow flowers and a big bright center that gives you delicious seeds. It's like,
yes.
So you can tell so much from the energy signature of something. And flower essences, I've been working with them even more so lately because I find that they're a really great partner to these sacred earth medicines. Talking about Jurema, how Jurema was really an intense experience because it does help us we have to say hello to the things that are difficult. So Jurema is named after a Amazonian cabocla, like a Amazonian Indian, basically, like a indigenous person. And she's this warrior. Like she is this beautiful woman. You would see her and just think she's, but she's super fierce. She reminds us that there is space for love and softness, but there's also that warrior quality that, the feminine energy brings through being that soft and vulnerable space. And I think for anybody, whether you are female bodied, male bodied, and no matter who you are, we all have a difficult time leaning into that feminine aspect of ourselves and allowing the strength within to be shown through vulnerability, to be shown through letting our guard down, processing grief, saying hello to difficult things that we've experienced or are currently going through, or, even if it's not something you're dealing with personally, the state of the world. There are many, many deaths that we live in our lives, many little deaths to big, the spectrum. And Jurema asks us to look at them with new eyes, because that's where the mushroom medicine comes in. It's like we're having a new perspective on how to carry that. We're not letting it go. Like grief doesn't leave us. It stays with us, but we become stronger and we know how to hold that. We know where to put that love. We know where to put that energy. And so the flower essences have been a beautiful ally to something even like that. So I would say Bleeding Heart is beautiful for Jurema. Ghost Pipe is beautiful for Jurema. So I was going through my library of essences and I'm like, these would actually go really well together to be a supportive tool for when we do have those days where you're like, shit, I do have to go through this. Like I have to have this difficult day today because I have to process it. And it's like, let me try Ghost Pipe Essence to help me gracefully allow these things to fall away, because they need to fall away. So like, show me how, show me a new set of eyes to see how to do this. And we'll find that during these microdosing experiences, through flower essence experiences, we are met with those chances to say hello, so there may be, and it's very like, I mean, you can't make this shit up. Like it's spiritual medicine as much as it's physical medicine. So like maybe that phone call that you were not really, looking forward to or kind of avoiding, all of a sudden you're driving and you're like, fuck it, I'm going to call them on a microdose date, and it's like, it's giving us the courage to be like, yeah, do the thing. Like
Yeah.
we have to go through those challenges again to become stronger, to continue going on and having more capacity for love, more capacity for ourselves. And that leads me to like our new blend is called La Culebra. Um, it's the first one that I've done that comes with a supplement aspect. So this whole blend surrounds sexual energy, like if you're experiencing low libido, but that experience is coming through stress. That experience of low libido and creative energy is coming through anxiety, is coming through not feeling healthy in your body, maybe your hormones are also off. Like it helps the endocrine system. It's adaptogenic, so it's helping to calm our nervous system, parasympathetic system. So I wanted to have something that, the root of a lot of what we're dealing with, like it's manifesting in different ways, but the root is often an unbalanced nervous system,
Yeah.
you know, that is going to attack our endocrine system, that is going to attack, so many other parts of our bodies. When that one system is off, our whole machine is slowly, I don't want to say malfunctioning, but it's not working in balance. And this medicine, it's so interesting. Like I'm going through, I have like a lot of Scorpio in my chart also. There's always lots of deaths and rebirths happening in my life. So when I decided to put this out to public, I wrote this whole long like blog post about where this medicine has come from. And like I said, a lot of these things are very personal to me. Like this medicine it has to come through me. I have to experience it before I put it out in the world. And it is another like rebirth medicine, like the snake. The snake is a symbol of rebirth. It sheds its skin. It's, there's so many symbolism, like so many symbols behind the snake and meanings but for me, it is this rebirth again, like shedding of the old skins, tapping back into that sacral energy, whether you are, it's our portal of creation. So whether that is life or
Art.
Everything, art, a meal, a conversation, like a heartfelt conversation, like that is also the way we connect to others. It helps us to connect more deeply to our ancestors because that is the space of that umbilical cord that connects us through our whole lineage. It's the space of our intuition, our gut, like my gut told me. So there's lots of carminative herbs in there to sort of like warm that space of, this is our furnace, our second brain. I think it's our first brain, but we'll call it whatever.
Yeah.
I think everything we eat is truly like our bodies knows before our mind is even aware. So it really focuses on that whole sacral root energy. I thought a lot about the Kundalini energy because that really helped me through the process, as this medicine was formulated 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now. And it's coming out now.
Wow.
Because I was sitting with it, like processing it. And yeah, it was time to.
I gotta say, I love how nothing about the work you do is rushed. It all comes when it needs to come, which is such a I know for myself. And it's funny, as I move into leaving my fertile years, right, and being done with that, the whole thing now is about actually being more in the feminine and not rushing shit anymore and not having to do what they do. Anyway, I love that. I'm a fan. I'm a fucking fan
I appreciate
of you and what you're doing. And I want all the absolute success for you. And I keep sending people I brought 5 women with me, or 4 women.
Yeah, they were all great. Yes.
To the space. And then on my birthday, somebody came with me who just was like, I'm coming. And,
I love that.
Because and they came from New Jersey and they loved your space and they're coming back. They're like, this is going to be my monthly. I'm going to that. This space is beautiful. The work you're putting out is beautiful. And I think this is the beginning of long. I think I'm going to hear about you go more and more and more, and hopefully have you on again, because I want to talk about other things. I want
Yes.
to talk about LSD. I want to talk about, there's so many
Yes.
things I want to talk about.
I would love that.
But
I would love that.
I just want to say thank you for this work that you're doing, and
Thank you so
your
much.
family and your daughter, and what she brings into the world will only be magnified and amplified by the work, the deep work that you have done. So that is just,
Oh my gosh.
short.
I appreciate you so much.
I really believe it. So I'm going to thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Private Parts of Wellness. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, hit the bell if you're watching it on YouTube. If you've got a question or an idea, you can leave it in the comments or reach out to me. I'd love to hear them. Until next time, embrace the magic and take care of your private parts.